Local programming on KRWG made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to a special Fronteras, A Changing America. I'm Edmundo Resendez. U.S. Senator Tom Udall has been the senior senator from New Mexico since January 2009. He was previously the representative for New Mexico's 3rd Congressional District from 1999 through 2008. Senator Udall sits in various committees and subcommittees, including the Commission on Security and Cooperation in Europe, the Senate Committee on Appropriations, and the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations. On May 2014, Senator Udall was instrumental in working with President Obama and local organizations to establish the Oregon Mountains Desert Peaks National Monument. Recently, Senator Udall hosted the Women's Career Success Conference in Las Cruces, which brought together area employers, nonprofit organizations, and federal agency officials to help women in New Mexico enhance their careers. Senator Udall, welcome to Fronteras, A Changing America. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Edmundo. A real pleasure to be here, and I always love it when I get into southern New Mexico.
Well, we love having you here, and let's talk about what the purpose of your visit. Aside from the beautiful weather, you came here for a couple of things. One of them is for the Women's Career Success Conference. Plus, you also were here with Federal Communications Commissioner Jessica Rosenworcel at Hatch Valley High School, where you discussed the stark inequality of access to broadband internet by students in New Mexico and across the nation. What did you hear from constituents during your visit regarding these two issues?
Well, the first visit in Hatch had to do with the fact that we have a big digital divide in this country. You have rural areas that aren't nearly served the way they should be. You don't have internet in the homes. You don't have that interconnectivity. And then you have urban areas that do a lot better. Places like Las Cruces and Albuquerque and Santa Fe. If you're living within the city limits, you're doing pretty well, and you're getting good internet access. And what results in this digital divide is the kids are learning on computers in the classroom. They're connected. They're supposed to do their homework on those same kinds of computers at home, and they're not able to do it. And that's where the term homework gap comes from, is that they can't complete their homework because they aren't connected. And that's a big problem. It's a problem for the child, it's a problem for the family, it's the whole community, because we need all of our young people to really get the best skills they can to be in a modern workforce and be competitive. And you know, we live in a global economy now, and so that's tremendously important.
I was interested to find out that many of the students in rural communities like Hatch in particular, where the students hang around the school area and outside a local convenience store so that they may have access to the internet.
That's right. We heard yesterday several students. We had a round table with students and parents, and several of them told us very telling stories about how they weren't connected, where they'd come in from a sporting event, and rather than go home, they would stay at the school outside in the parking lot so they could get the Wi-Fi and plug in and do their homework. And that's just unacceptable, I think. I think we should be getting people interconnected. It isn't just about school, it's about a better healthcare system, it's about a better economy, and as I said, it's about pulling all families up. And so we thought it was very important for this FCC commissioner to come to New Mexico to see the circumstances and take a hard look at those programs to make sure that they reach out to rural areas and get everybody connected.
Let's talk about the women's conference that you held. What brought that together to have it here in Las Cruces?
Well, we've done 4 of these. I believe this one was the 4th. I think this is the 2nd one we've done in Las Cruces. And the reason, as you talked about in the opening there, we're trying to pull people from all over the community, whether it's a nonprofit or a business or people that do work with accelerators or incubators and work with growing businesses, and trying to have them make presentations and interact with women that are early in their career or maybe changing careers or retiring and thinking of another career, and give them very good advice. And we basically have a morning activity with panelists and some incredibly good speakers and experienced women in the community, and then in the afternoon they break into a couple of different tracks. Is it just a career they're looking at and to better those skills, or is it actually a business track and working with a small business and making it better and growing it? And the whole day ends up being a wonderful experience for them. I mean, I love the enthusiasm when you're there. I spent the whole morning over there, and the enthusiasm about sharing ideas, meeting each other, networking, and then getting out and doing a better job for New Mexico. And there's nothing like the statistics out there. 40% of our businesses are women-owned, but it's dramatically more from those women-owned businesses. Dramatically more of the real revenue is from the women-owned businesses than the male-owned businesses, and so they make a big contribution, no doubt about it.
The conversation of wage gap come up?
Oh, you bet it did. You bet it did.
What did you hear from some of these women here in southern New Mexico about that?
Well, that was probably one of the biggest applause lines when I said that it's a woman earns 78 cents to a man earning $1. That's unacceptable. People, they understand that. In concrete terms, I throw out percentages there, but we're talking about $10,000 difference in the average over all the people in New Mexico. I mean, that hurts families, hurts communities. It's holding children back. That $10,000 could go a long way to moving people forward. And so we need to do everything we can. One of the ways we can do that is raise the minimum wage. I mean, I've been a big proponent for that. I've always voted to raise the minimum wage, and I'm just tremendously encouraged that our larger communities have already gone way up in New Mexico, way above the minimum wage. So they're pushing us and sending us the message, you better act at the federal level and bring up that federal minimum wage.
It seems that during this election cycle, the minimum wage has been brought up more times than other elections that I can recall.
Well, the reason is, Edmundo, it's been 7 years since we've raised the minimum wage. And if you indexed it, we'd be now, I think, up about $12 or something. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a lot more than $7.25. And so people are falling behind. And something that people don't realize in thinking about why we did a minimum wage, it's a floor. It's not supposed to be a working wage, and yet many families rely on it as a working wage, and many of them are women, single women that are working. And so you can see someone raising a child in difficult circumstances. I mean, that's a problem for all of us, I think.
And it's a problem that, again, that at least it's being discussed, and so I'm happy that conversation's on the table. Let's move on to the Senate, and how frustrating is it for you as a senator to be in a situation where there's a potential precedent, or there is a precedent that's being set by the withholding of the nomination of Judge Merrick Garland to the U.S. Supreme Court? The Senate has been accused by many of not fulfilling its constitutional duty by not putting forth a vote on the nomination.
This is absolutely unprecedented. And when I say that, what I'm talking about, the Senate has never done this before. They have never, a year before the end of a president's term, said, we don't want to do anything. We won't do our job. We're going to kick it to the next president. And it's not working out well for them. Everything I've seen, my travels in New Mexico, talking with people say this is obstructionism at its worst. It's what's happening in Washington now that we don't like. The best I can do is speak up, travel, talk to people in New Mexico, and I think the pressure's building. When it first, just to give you an example, in the polls talking to people, it was kind of even when it first came out and they announced we're not going to do anything, we're opposing this, we're obstructing. And when we came up with our theme, a lot of us have said this is a simple issue. The president's job under the Constitution is to nominate. The Senate's job is to process that nomination, to have a hearing and to vote. And so do your job. Republican senators, do your job. Well, guess what? Now it's about 70% to 30%. The people saying this is obstructionism, we don't like it. Mitch McConnell and Republican senators, do your job.
For constituents across the country that are not involved in the process, who just outside looking in, they're looking at, as you just mentioned, 70% of the people wanting to do this, and currently you're looking at many cases before the Supreme Court that might wind up for ties. What additional pressures can be added to Senate Republicans to get them to do at least act on at least holding the hearings?
The main pressure is going to be the public. That's what it's been all along. I mean, as I said, when it was first announced, we didn't have a nominee. And one of the things about this is the nominee in his background. I mean, he is a person not only who has been an outstanding judge, before he was a judge, he took charge of the Oklahoma City bombing case, had an incredible record with victims in terms of reaching out and making sure they understood the legal process and the criminal justice process, and the victims today still talk about him in very fond terms. And secondly, many people never knew this about him, but for 18 years he mentored a high school student in the Washington, D.C. schools. And so he took time off out of his day, worked with a principal, went over to the high school, met one-on-one with a student for a couple of hours a week in order to bring that student up in the whole learning process. So people have learned about him, and I think that's one of the things that's changed. But the thing that is going to change this is people speaking out. I know a lot of law professors have spoken out, law students. I'm running into average citizens all over the place that just say, this is unacceptable. Do your job. Mitch McConnell and Republican senators, do your job.
Let's talk about border security. Living here in southern New Mexico, we're an hour away from the border, but it seems that you must hear from constituents, about borderline concerns of drug and immigrant smugglers all the time. And it seems that border security the conversation is going beyond just the border now. They're looking at, the internal part of the United States. And we asked our Facebook fans, likers of KRWG, if they had any questions. And let's go to a Facebook question by Steve Montañez, who wants to know, why did you vote against the sanctuary bill in 2015 that also included Kate's Law, which would have provided for mandatory sentences for repeat border crossers? At one point, you called this bill a politically motivated bill.
Yeah, it was a politically motivated bill, and it was really a packaging of a bill to try to put people on the spot. Everybody knows, Edmundo, this is the really important point. I've worked on border security from the very beginning at the federal level in the Congress. When I came into the Senate, I took over Senator Bingham's task force. We meet on a regular basis, about every 3 months. My staff and I stay very, very involved in what's going on the border, and people should know the real facts. Here's what's happened since I've been in the Congress. First of all, the Border Patrol and the numbers have dramatically increased. In the last 10 years, we've doubled the Border Patrol. In the last couple of years, thousands of additional Border Patrol agents. The numbers of people coming across the border are going down. We're having fewer incidents, but even one incident is too many. You mentioned the whole rancher incident that occurred near the Boot Heel area. I find that unacceptable, and what I do in that situation is I meet with the Border Patrol, I have my staff meet with them, we carry on an exchange, we tell them exactly what we think they should do. And the first thing they should do, we've put two additional, since I've been in the Congress, forward operating bases. One of the problems we're having is too many agents rotate out too quickly, so we need incentives so they stay in the community there in Lordsburg and down in those bases and get to know the community a little better. They need more horses. This is very rugged territory, horses to get around. The National Guard has helicopters that can only operate 6 months a year with the funding that's been given them. I've advocated in the Appropriations Committee to give them additional funding and to make sure that everything that we need at the border, the agents, the technology, the equipment, that it's all there in place. And I think, as I said with those figures early on, we're doing better. We're not doing perfect, but we're pushing hard and we're making progress. And the Boot Heel is one of the most rugged areas in the entire United States. And so you just need to throw a different set of people and equipment and horses and helicopters and things like that at the issue in order to get on top of it.
With the debate on sanctuary cities, with the vote that came out in 2015, and Kate's law, which looks at a mandatory sentence of 5 years for repeat offenders, and in doing some research, some of these repeat offenders are nonviolent, undocumented immigrants that are coming here looking for a job. To put them away for 5 years in a federal prison would seem that would be a little too much when you're averaging 30,000 of these repeat offenders a year.
Well, there's a balance here in terms of how we handle folks that are in the United States, sometimes for a short period of time, sometimes much longer. And that's why I've been a big advocate for comprehensive border reform. First of all, we need to secure the border. We were just talking about that. Secondly, we need to make sure that employers, if they do illegal activity in terms of immigration and employment in the employment sector, that there are sanctions for them. And then I'm a big believer that the 11 million people that are here in the United States, put aside the smaller number who are criminals, and they should be deported and sent back to their home countries. But
and by the way, there is a process in the immigration process that there's background checks on these criminals, that it's not just a blanket that everybody gets immediate access to become legal citizens.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And actually, if you ask questions, Edmundo, to people that are the 11 million that are here, some people are here and they would be perfectly happy to work and be able to return to their country and be able to go back and forth without becoming citizens. We should deal with that issue. There are many, many others who would like to have the protections of a green card or later become a citizen, and put them on the path to citizenship, and I think we can do that. I really believe we can do that. We passed a bill through the Senate, comprehensive reform, dealing with exactly what I talked about, those issues there, and we couldn't even get the House of Representatives to bring it up. And my friends over in the House said if that bill came to the floor and we had a vote on it, it would have passed. And so really the Republican Congress in the House just refused to do its job on immigration. And the President, he was engaged in the process. He liked our bill. He had suggestions and improvements. And so the big issue on immigration isn't this targeting specific people. And talking about that and getting people all riled up. It's talking about the overall problem. Talking about border security, which is extremely important to me and what I work on a lot, as I mentioned here earlier. And then the employer side of this, as you said, people are coming here to get a better way of life, and the employers are the magnet, and we need to deal with that situation. And then thirdly, most of these 11 million that are here aren't criminals. The criminals are going to be deported, but they're willing to learn English, to pay any past fines, to be the good citizens they've been while they've been here, and we should bring them out of the shadows and put them on a path to citizenship.
What would it take to get comprehensive immigration reform back on the table, back in the discussion? Right now, it's part of the debates. People are talking about it, but where it really needs to be discussed at the House, and the Senate's already discussed it, it's not happening there. Why is there such rhetoric to have this be such a hot potato issue, but not where it needs to happen?
Well, here's what we're going to see over the next 6 months. It looks in all likelihood now that Donald Trump is going to be the nominee. We all know he said very disparaging and mean, nasty things about minorities, about women. He's talked about building a wall and making Mexico pay for it, which I think is very, very unlikely. And in fact, the Mexican president has kind of laughed at that as a joke. And so we will have a debate in this presidential campaign. It'll take place all over the country. And whoever is elected president will have been forced to lay out a concrete plan, and is going to have to tackle the plan and do it. I don't see Donald Trump being able to pass any of the things he's talking about. If he's actually talking about deporting 11 million people, I mean, that's just not going to happen. It's not the path people in this country want to move on.
Well, let's keep it with the presidential election. You know, this election cycle has brought us the building of walls. It's brought us free college tuitions, the deportation of 11+ million undocumented immigrants, email servers, the banning of Muslims from entry into the U.S., and the proper way of eating pizza. This is just the primary season. What are your expectations for the general election?
Well, I hope it settles down a little bit, because I believe the American people want a serious discussion about the issues. They don't want pandering to their fears. They don't want demagoguery. They would like to see the two major candidates have a discussion on these big issues. The first one is our economy and how we fit in terms of the global economy and competitiveness and trade and all of that. And people just want to see our job growth here in the United States. They don't want people offshoring jobs and taking advantage of a tax code which encourages that, which we all know we should be changing. And so that's the kind of central issue, is jobs and building the middle class and moving in the direction of a growing economy that's making a difference in people's lives. Next to that, security issues are tremendously important. We feel them even more here on New Mexico because we're in New Mexico because we're on the border. And we've talked about that. With the Zika virus, Ebola, these other things, very important that we get on top of them, give the dollars that are needed. That I think will be in the presidential debate. I mean, right now, the Republicans in the Congress are actually not willing to put forward the money to fight the Zika virus. I mean, the president has a very reasonable request. They're just willing.
That's a
$1.9
billion request.
Right, yeah.
And New Mexico, as you may be aware, is on the perceived front lines, in particular southern New Mexico, for the Zika virus, for the mosquitoes. This is where they live, and if somebody were to travel to South America, come back with a disease and mosquito bites, it could potentially spread.
That's right.
And so, is there enough money on the local level, on the federal level, to take care of that?
Well, and that's why the president's asked for $1.9 billion to move us in the direction of getting ready and tackling this in all the aspects, including the research that's being done at the NIH and our other research institutions in the country.
How should Secretary Clinton move forth to unite the party? Secretary Sanders has created a movement, a huge movement across the country with groundswell support from the youth. And will Secretary Clinton be able to bring the party together against Donald Trump, who too has created a movement on the other side?
I think she will. I think all indications are that she's trying to bring people together. I know recently she mentioned the idea of reforming our political system, campaign finance system, the fact that there's too much big money and dark money in the system. And she says, Bernie Sanders has been very persistent on that, and I want to take his ideas and the ones I proposed before and really push that. And I think that's what she needs to do, is look at what his supporters have been excited about, adopt the things you can adopt, but obviously put together your plan like she's been doing over time, and push it. And I think with the contrast there of this kind of fear-mongering and demagoguery out of Donald Trump, I think people are going to see that this is a person who's fought all of her life for the middle class. She's somebody who really believes that government can work in behalf of people, and they don't want to repeal all the good things that have been done under President Obama. The health care in New Mexico, more than 300,000 people have health care now that didn't have it. And we're going to repeal that, and we don't even know what's going to be put in its place. And I can name a lot of other things that have been done too. But I think there's been some real progress. Let's not turn that progress back. Let's try to look at how do we move forward and build on what we've done already.
In the final moments that we've got, I'd like to, as I mentioned in the beginning, you were instrumental in helping establish the Organ Mountains Desert Peaks National Monument. But you are not done yet. You are interested in establishing additional monuments in New Mexico. What other wilderness areas are you working on?
Well, the wilderness part of this, most of the areas in New Mexico now that are proposed for wilderness were wilderness study that were designated in the 1980s. And so it's important for everybody to know we took a long look at this for over 30 or 40 years and said, which are the areas that deserve the highest protection? Only Congress can designate wilderness. And so when we did Oregon Peaks, Oregon Mountains, Desert Peaks, we couldn't designate wilderness in that monument because it was a presidential monument. President can't do that, Congress has to do it. So we're taking those wilderness study areas that are within the monument and making them into wilderness areas. The thing I would like to say that is so important, Edmundo, is the fact that we're growing jobs as a result of these new monuments. Millions of dollars has flowed into New Mexico. I believe the receipts in Mesilla are up 20%. From tourists and from business activity that's going on as a result of these monuments. They're growing jobs, they're making our communities stronger, and in addition, the people that are doing activity in these monuments, some of them on state land, for example, the ranchers grazing, that grazing activity can continue. There's no prohibition against grazing in a wilderness area. That was the grand compromise when we passed the wilderness bill that my father was involved in the 1960s, and everybody said, well, you know, how do we get a compromise that works? And they said, well, we'll continue grazing so long as it's sustainable and it takes care of the land.
Well, Senator Tom Udall, Democrat from New Mexico, thank you very much for coming into Fronteras and Changing America. We're out of time, but I'd like to extend an invitation. Anytime you're in southern New Mexico, we'd love to have you back again.
We'll be back with you again.
For Fronteras and Changing America, I'm Edmundo Resendez. Thank you for joining us.